Every inhalation tasted like ozone and copper. It was the distinct, sharp tang of a blown circuit. Trainee Scout Pyle wanted to note in the official log that the air scrubbers were running perfectly. He had verified the filtration protocols himself. He checked them twice, but the water in his suspension tank tasted like burning metal. The main sensor console wasn't just flashing red. It was screaming. The digits were cascading. Too many numbers. The processing core ran out of integers to count the engine signatures, suddenly materializing in Sector 4. He was looking at empty space. Then the starlight bent. The official reports state the Palithi detected the humans. They didn't. The humans let themselves be seen, and the galaxy needs to know exactly how that felt. The diagnostic readouts had been beautifully boring just 2 hours earlier, and as a provisional scout on his first deep space deployment, which he was fully qualified for, regardless of his young age, Pyle was determined to follow every standard observation protocol perfectly. He was floating in the nutrient-rich currents of the observation tank. His bioluminescent identity pattern was a calm, steady blue. The Sector 4 void was mathematically empty. He remembered the temperature of the water. It was exactly standard, perfectly regulated. He was composing a message to his clutch siblings about he needed to start that over. He wasn't composing a message, he was staring at nothing. The silence of the void is supposed to be absolute. The frigate, designated current assembly, was drifting on minimal power, standard stealth protocols, listening to the dark. Then the water changed. It didn't change temperature. The chemical balancers showed no deviation, but Pyle smelled something. It was a rich, heavy scent, like turned earth, like crushed organic matter leaking into the sterile filtration system. He documented it immediately. He logged a Level 1 environmental anomaly. Check exterior vents, Pyle signaled to the bridge. His luminescent ridges flashed the standard sequence for caution. The bridge ignored him. They were looking at the optical feeds. Pyle looked too. The starfield was wrong. It wasn't blocked. If a ship moves in front of a star, the light vanishes. That is basic physics. That is how scouts track movement. But the stars weren't vanishing. They were smearing, bending in sickening, impossible curves. He pulled up the thermal arrays. Nothing. He checked the electromagnetic spectrum. Nothing. No energy shields. No emissions. Just distorted starlight. Pyle felt a deep, physical pressure in his primary flotation bladder. It wasn't fear yet. It was confusion. He was looking at empty space, but the water smelled like dirt, and his body felt like it was being crushed. Then the navigation computer stuttered. Palithi processors run on fluid dynamic quantum calculations. They do not stutter. They do not freeze. But the display flickered. It tried to render a mass reading. The number rolled over. It hit the integer limit. It crashed. The entire primary system simply gave up. Pyle wanted to be very clear for the subsequent inquiry. A computer does not crash from counting, not unless there are more objects than there are variables in the memory array. The starlight stopped bending. The optical camouflage dropped. They didn't decloak. They just stopped bending the light around themselves. Negative refractive index metamaterials. Pyle read about them in a theoretical physics seminar once. A concept, a myth, wrapping a hull in a material that forces light to flow around it, like water around a stone. The human dreadnoughts weren't hiding behind shields. They were wearing the void, and there wasn't one of them. There were 10. No, 100. No, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. The optical camouflage didn't just drop. It shattered across the entire visual spectrum. Space itself suddenly filled with jagged, brutalist metal. I want to note that I tried to log the exact tonnage. Standard procedure dictates a full mass assessment of any unclassified vessels entering assembly territory. I initiated the scan. The sensor array literally melted its primary relays trying to process the sheer volume of overlapping hulls. The human fleet had navigated through the most heavily fortified sector of the galaxy without triggering a single tripwire, entirely because they had wrapped their dreadnoughts in negative refractive index metamaterials. And now, with that same metallic taste of a blown circuit flooding my gills, the screaming red digits on the main console made terrifying sense. The starlight hadn't just bent. It had been pushed aside by an ocean of iron. My bioluminescent identity pattern, which is the specific genetic sequence of light that marks me as a citizen of the current assembly and displays the exact colors my clutch siblings would recognize across a crowded spawning pool, scrambled into chaotic, erratic flashes of pure white. I lost my identity marker entirely. My flotation bladder compressed. I curled into a tight fetal ball in the center of the suspension tank. I didn't decide to do it. Biology overrode protocol. I transmitted a frantic, maximum priority fleet warning. Well, I smashed my ventral fin against the emergency broadcast relay, but it transmitted. The response wasn't a threat. It was an automated human handshake protocol. Signal received. Signal read. No action required. Our captain ordered a catastrophic power down. We played dead. The frigate went completely dark. I remember staring at a tiny, crescent-shaped scratch on the interior glass of my tank. Someone had buffed it poorly during the last maintenance cycle. I watched that scratch while 100,000 Terran dreadnoughts drifted past our hull without vibrating a single acoustic sensor. They didn't even slow down. They didn't care that we were there. The frigate remained dark for 14 hours after the last engine signature faded from the passive scanners. We surrendered without firing a shot, without even being asked. The water in my tank eventually filtered out the copper taste of the blown circuits, but the other scent remained. That heavy, rich smell of turned earth and crushed organics. I breathed it in the dark. It wasn't an environmental anomaly anymore. It was the scent of a species that had learned to weaponize the abyss, and I knew I would never feel clean again.